What's the delivery landscape that you observe in the companies that you go into?
There are large flavors of agile everywhere, as you can imagine. If the company is newer to software development in general, so think about traditional German companies having a digital business unit that is somehow separated or considers IT a cost center and so on, they will go super hard on the whole Scrum stuff. But like by the book, the way someone preaches the Bible, add all the Scrum Masters, add all the Agile coaches, kind of confuse the role of a PM with a PO that is a ticket shredder. I really loved this joke by Ryan Singer. So that is like one flavor of company, less of an ideal customer profile, but fine for our junior people building up product owner skills. Then the next one would be an intersection of both. Trying to discover that the PM role is business or needs to have a strong commercial facing area, but somehow also creates the product owner role who remains the ticket shredder and the project manager. I think that's a pretty dangerous and poor setup, and we advise clients against it. And then the other ones are the more, let's say, Marty Kagan PM type of companies, or at least aspire to do so. And even just aspiring to do so makes things easier.
Welcome to Shapers and Builders, the show about better ways to deliver great software products. Today I'm speaking with Mirela Mus, founder and CPO at Product People. Her team of 41 in-house product managers helps companies cover parental leaves, scale teams up quickly during hypergrowth, and cover any other use case that calls for interim product managers. This bonus episode breaks with the main theme of Season 1 of the Shapers and Builders podcast, which is primarily about case studies of teams using ShapeUp. Instead, today we get to enjoy the fact that Mirela and her team have worked within every product development context you can imagine, and learn from the incredible breadth of experience that Mirela has built up over the past 5 years with her team. Besides ShapeUp, which Mirela experienced during an engagement at Tier Mobility, we talk about the general landscape of software delivery, the intricacies of interim product management, how to evaluate seniority in any role, and what you can learn about product management from reading science fiction books. I had the best of times talking to Mirela, and I'm sure you'll enjoy our conversation. Mirela, I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
So happy to be here.
You're actually the first famous person that I have on, at least I would say within the Berlin startup scene for sure. Do you consider yourself famous?
For interim product management, I think Product People is one of the most known companies in Europe because it's also something relatively new that we've started and focused solely on it as a company.
For sure. And I think that's a great start to the conversation. I'd love to hear a bit more on the background of Product People. What is it? What you do? Why is it that you're doing this? And how many people are you now?
So I'll start with the people, about 41 in-house employees. So they're not contractors. We're not a marketplace. We hire people full-time that serve our clients in interim product management roles. This can also be product operations, product leadership roles, or if the company is a bit more in the Scrum style, product owner roles. We serve this on a fractional basis, sometimes also with a part-time client involvement. So someone could be 2 days per week at a client, 2 days per week at another client. They're all full-time on our payroll and committed to Product People. We pride ourselves for onboarding fast, aligning teams, and delivering outcomes. So this is how we make money. With examples like parental covers, helping structure product teams or product operation teams, or running discovery streams separately if the PMs are busy. What we also do to give back in the world and has also helped us tremendously in recruiting very smart individuals into our companies is the product management community. And that is live stream events, which we publish for free weekly, sometimes in-person events, speaking at conferences, running a podcast, and so on and so forth.
Cool. And why did you start Product People? What was the spark for you?
I was spending some time figuring out what to do next, as I've always wanted to start a company. I have lots of examples in my family. And once doing that, I saw a gap on the market between maybe to take a step back. When companies get large enough or big enough, they will always have some part of it that is external. So in a general setup, we would see management consulting firms. We would see also body leasing agencies, usually dev shops, design shops, or everything shops that, you come up with a title, they'll rename someone internally and give you that person.
Yeah.
So this type of setup I've observed over and over again on the market, also being a customer of this type of services. And I did notice a gap between management consulting that does strategy and then the implementation body leasing shops, where if they have the product manager, product owner role, it's more focused on ensuring the billable days for the developers, because that is 80% of the revenue. So I'm not saying that, people would come up and have this intention, but the way it's set up is that no one challenges what the dev team does, and if things drag on or get a bit overly bloated, it's for the better in the bottom line of this company. And we felt that this is already a conflict of interest, that it's worth having a company that is not incentivized to sell other services and do product management right. And that also turned out to be a very good angle for recruiting, because most PMs would be afraid of going to an agency, as they're afraid of becoming a ticket shredder. There's like all you do is like, okay, go write tickets, go and handhold the developers, because they're the ones bringing most of the revenue to one of these companies. The typical staffing would be 6-7 other functions and then one PM, when the body leasing shops try to sell the whole team.
Yeah, got it. I mean, 41 in-house employees, that sounds like a lot. I guess a lot of tech companies will look at you in a way that you're stealing all the PM talent out there, right?
I would say that the people we focus on are sometimes not a fit for the in-house employees, and vice versa. Think about it in the management consulting firms, right? Why did people in the past, why did young ambitious people in the past go to consulting firms? To get a wide experience across industries and figuring out what they want to do. And most importantly, also to amp their career, because you could go work at one company and just kind of tie your reputation and your learnings and your brand to that, or you could go to a McKinsey, BCG, Bain, and see across a variety of those. If you like the context switching and the workload and sometimes the pressure that comes with consulting, then maybe that's a good path for you. If you don't like that, you would still be better off than someone who didn't start there, because now you're going to have a big brand on your CV and experience from other bigger brands, and you can position yourself to enter middle management or like some interesting role, what consulting firms call the industry. So like anyone else that's not consulting.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And I want to get a bit deeper into the differences that you see with what you're calling fractional PM or interim PM positions versus in-house. And I'm going on paternity leave actually in a few months. Thank you. Looking forward to it. And we have hired a freelance product manager now to come in and cover me. And they'll be fully focused basically on delivering an initiative that kind of I've worked out with the team now. So they'll be in a pure execution role during that time. I'm gone for about 2 months. So just my imagination from the outside in is that for a stint of only a few months, it's not nearly enough time to really go deep into the context of the company, the context of the customer, understanding the product, the architecture behind it, and so on, and to go through the full discovery motions. Is that something that you observe in the work that you all do as well, where you're more focused on the execution side of things? Or do you actually, is my perception wrong on that?
So all very good questions. I would throw a question back at you to get a bit more context on the company. So why did you go for a freelancer? I assume this is an independent contractor that your company will be paying for this short time.
Yeah,
why not
exactly.
go to a company for this type of service?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a special case where this person has worked with the company before. So this person already has the context. And in a way, we're bringing them back for a short period of time.
Yeah, so that's already a very good answer. And I understand now why the tenure is so short, because this can become labor law liability in Germany, especially, for example, when we were onboarding with Zalando, we had a checkbox there. If any of our people are ex-Zalando employees as contractors, because this could be seen as a way to offload employees into a new company that doesn't look like the main one, right? So the larger a company gets, the more restrictions are around that, which creates a pretty good moat for us, because our people are full-time on our payroll. We're not passing a German freelancer through. And at the same time, we have multiple revenue streams from a lot of large known brands, including the World Health Organization, that we can't seem like a sub-department of some corporate that's trying to minimize their labor compliance risks. So that's one of the things. I understand in this context that it was more of a regretted attrition, that you're potentially trying to bring back. Maybe they even stay as an employee, because this is where I would differentiate ourselves also from the freelancers on the market. So we're very friendly towards all the other vendors, because in our setup, we will be working with at least 2-3 other vendors. If the company is big enough. Sometimes the company has body leasing agencies, sometimes they have strategy firms, sometimes they also just have independent contractors. And we've seen two paths for independent contractors. It's sometimes to pay the bills and fill the resume while you're looking for your next full-time role, which in this tough job market, it's advisable. I've also seen it in leadership positions, which come across with a smaller frequency than, let's say, individual contributor roles like a senior PM or a PM. If you're looking for a VP, director of product, head of CPO, you can't go just take the next thing, right? You're kind of, and I've seen people use this a bit as a dating period with the new company and figuring out if what they were promised actually matches the title and work they've been seeing. Because I guess there are a lot of these stories where someone gets promised a big team, big scope, and then they're ending up being like the assistant of the sales team. And it's like, no, but I thought I'm coming here as a CPO to drive the business and be on eye level with all the other departments. It's like, no, it's, just go and shepherd delivery. And then with this one, I can come back to your question of, are our missions delivery focused, or do we actually get more interesting work? It depends on the client and the level of seniority they engage. So at Product People, we have 9 levels of seniority. What we would call the product owner focused on delivery part would be more of an L3, that's an associate product management consultant. Maybe sometimes also L4, which is a product management consultant. From there on, we expect people to be able to run discovery very well, drive strategy, even if initially they're given this type of tasks, because sometimes the client just doesn't have the trust that someone will get up to speed fast, and or they just have their house burning and all you can do is get a bucket of water and throw it in there. So our first rule in B2B is don't get fired. Initially, we try to go to the motions and what the client says we should be focused on, because they have the best knowledge and they know that. Once we get onboarded, which we estimate to be 2 weeks, if it's super speedy, sometimes in larger corporates, it could be 4 weeks, then we can come with proposals or feedback or questions that we figure out the best audience to give, because we also don't want to be disruptive. And unless the company comes in and say, okay, this is a transformation, we're reworking product or we're introducing product ops or we're doing something new, sometimes you just want to cover a maternity leave for 2 months or work on pre-agreed topics. And that's totally fine, and we respect that, and we understand our role. If there's more time, we also try to give advice and help people on the improvement points that we notice, while figuring out the right audience and the right place to make these suggestions. So it also, reading the room is super important in our cases. And that's also something we did notice when hiring. If there are people that don't have high cognitive flexibility and understanding that not everything is like the last company they worked on, or not everything is as it works at product people, then those people are more successful. So there's a degree of unlearning when you join product people, which sounds counterintuitive at first. As examples, we've also had, let's say, pure discovery initiatives or pure 0 to 1. For example, large e-commerce company in Germany wanted to have a 0 to 1 type of subscription product because they were transaction based. So regular e-commerce, you sell a thing, then you sell another thing, and these have less of a purchase frequency than they would have desired, just due to the nature of this, right? You don't buy a mattress or pillows every week. You kind of, it's a 1 to 3 year type of expenditure. And our people were more focused on discovery for a subscription product that is in the space of sleep. And that's, we first smoke tested a lot of hypotheses. We ended up with support from one engineering manager and that team building a no-code MVP, which we ran for a while, understood what's being utilized, accepted, liked, understood. And then that ended up being spinned off as a separate venture, fully with a dedicated mobile app development team, which came from another team where we decommissioned the product. And I think that's the best example of the value product people brings, because if we would have come in with that development team, we wouldn't want our colleagues fired, right? Because we also didn't know at some point what will happen with the people there. Although one of our PMs went shopping around and said, hey, we're going to have this internal dev team that becomes available. Do you other PMs have topics, or should we allocate them on a completely new stream, and so on? And it ended up that they were reallocated on a completely new stream, and we had a nice handover between the PM that was decommissioning a product with low adoption and utilization rate that the company decided it's more cost efficient to white label, and going into this new stream that we discovered has more traction and interest from consumers.
Cool. I'd love to understand a bit from your experience, because you touched on this, onboarding being very speedy, 2 to 4 weeks. And then if there's more time, you would self-expand the scope of the person that goes in, maybe with a delivery focus first, but then expand out. What are some of the typical milestones or timeframes that you observe? Like, what's the time frame where you can be just heads down on delivery? How long does a stint need to be to get really into the context of the company, the customer, the products, and so on?
That also depends on the level of seniority that we staff. It's definitely a large factor, and also the setup of the client, because there are some clients where we get incredibly restricted access to things, just how the way they treat externals, where there are others where like, here is our MicroStrategy or Looker dashboard, and you are invited to most of the leadership meetings. That's one component. The other component is how well is delivery set up. I know John Cutler had one of these LinkedIn posts that really made me say, yes, he's seen it. There are some companies where just delivering something, it's a tremendous effort due to how they're set up, their tech debt, everything is so fucking unbearably hard that even like having the smallest A/B test live is like, oh my god, it elsewhere this would have taken 2 days to set up and optimizely. Here it took like 3 months of this. So it's also the context that sometimes shapes up what we want to do. We of course try to be strategic, pick up low hanging fruit that we can do that makes sense to the strategy and direction our client gave us. But that's indeed a big factor. And we would also tell them, based on our observation, these are some things that work better here and better there, because it depends the size of the company, B2C, B2B orientation, everything else they're going from, like a post M&A setup. It's absolutely insane. So is hyper growth. And there you expect a lot of processes and things to fall through and break, and especially it being very hard for the existing employees who signed up for a different reality than they're getting thrown in right now. Whereas for us, it's like business as usual. And for the duration, we recommend for the interim roles to start at 3 months. So I see you're on the mark with the 2.5 months, because we estimate 2 weeks to onboard, 2 weeks to offboard. So then you just have 2 months of actual work that you can lead internally. On an average, our engagements are 5 to 6 months. And there are some where we would start at 3 months in one department, like, for example, how you bring in this freelancer. Then you come back from parental, but a director or a VP noticed and liked our person and it's like, oh, wait, there's another employee exiting since you already have the laptop and the accounts and have figured out how we do planning and prioritizing. How about you now go from this consumer facing side of the product organization into the payments integration or B2B tooling part. And then 3 to 6 months in, there's another parental or there's another exit, or no, now we're reorganizing, or there's PM who stopped liking doing X and wants to do Y or Z. And we would like to move them, but we don't have someone to take over their existing scope. How about you do that? So we've seen this quite a lot. I think the hardest part for us is to get into a new organization. And this is also why we have our ideal customer profile leaning more towards Series B plus to publicly listed digital first companies. Because if they're not digital first, they're just going to take someone with a pulse from a body leasing agency that does some basic project management. But if they start having expectations that PMs drive the business and look at commercial KPIs and have a meaningful impact, plus if the client is good at systemic thinking and understanding incentives and that you want checks and balances even within your contractors, then that's an ideal setup for us. And we have seen the market validate this, that some clients are even doing it for when they outsource development, that they take people and mix them up from two development team vendors separately so that they understand the speed and the balance, and that the other developers can provide more accurate feedback on how the developer from outsourcing company 1 is performing versus outsourcing company 2 versus outsourcing company 3. And then that with the PM and like some internal oversight. Yes, because sometimes there are cases where you just need to bring a lot of people in. And how do you do that while not giving away your whole business or not being at the mercy of whatever one vendor tells you to be true? Well, they're also incentivized to stay there as long as possible. So we're also incentivized with that. I understand our biases, but at most we could do is sell more PMs. And at most we could do is like sell 41 PMs, which we wouldn't do, because then we would have a risk on being over allocated at one client, which wouldn't be the smartest thing to do, as you always want your eggs in multiple baskets.
Yeah, that is super interesting. It's an industry I haven't really had any touch points with in the past. It's super cool to learn.
No worries. I've had that for a while, and I'm still discovering companies I never heard of that are over 1,000 people big. So it's a super big industry to begin with, and most of our red ocean. So we've also looked at how do we differentiate within this setup, considering it's very easy to clone, set something up new, and so on. Like, how do you become so ingrained and so well known for the quality and the type of work you provide as a brand that it's a no-brainer to go with product people instead of considering other options?
Yeah. We spoke about this before, that right now I'm talking to a lot of people on how they have adopted ShapeUp, this delivery framework. And generally, I'm trying to explore kind of how different teams run the delivery side of things. And I love that you basically get an overview into many, many companies and how they're building products. So, what's the delivery landscape that you observe in the companies that you go into?
There are large flavors of agile everywhere, as you can imagine. If the company is newer to software development in general, so think about traditional German companies having a digital business unit that is somehow separated or considers IT a cost center and so on, they will go super hard on the whole Scrum stuff. But like by the book, the way someone preaches the Bible, add all the Scrum masters, add all the agile coaches, kind of confuse the role of a PM with a PO that is a ticket shredder. I really loved this joke by Ryan Singer, who wrote ShapeUp, which I'm sure you read a few times already. So that is like one flavor of company, less of an ideal customer profile, but fine for our junior people building up product owner skills. Then the next one would be an intersection of both. Trying to discover that the PM role is business or needs to have a strong commercial facing area, but somehow also creates the product owner role who remains the ticket shredder and the project manager. I think that's a pretty dangerous and poor setup, and we advise clients against it. Many times we get objections that, hey, we need to scale, we're present in a double digit or triple digit number of markets. How do we split the PM role without letting things fall through and overwhelming them? And then one of the answers is product ops, technical program management, and so on and so forth. And then the other ones are the more, let's say, Marty Kagan PM type of companies, or at least aspire to do so. And even just aspiring to do so makes things easier. So we've seen nice setups at company like Zalando, where engineering managers need to, people wanting to promote as an engineering manager or as a tech team lead, need to show understanding of commercial KPIs and what they've done to show that traction. And of course, for the PMs, it's absolutely part of the requirements. And that has gotten way more buy-in and help from the engineering side than I've ever seen elsewhere, plus trying to understand the user, the personas, the use cases, jobs to be done, and getting a sense of the roadmap and the direction of business units. It doesn't work everywhere. So you will also notice that there are some companies where even if you try to do that, there are some engineers that just mentally check out and will complain at the first uncertain thing and so on. So it doesn't solve everything. It solves it also if you have the right person and the right motivation. And then you can also use your talent management processes internally to figure out if the people who don't do that are a long-term fit, or where do you position them. I've seen ShapeUp work at Tier and also doing that, and it was very refreshing setup. It worked well as when we were experiencing this, the company was in hypergrowth, and they worked with 2-month cycles. So the 6 delivery, 2 weeks of cooldown, and that helped not have enormous alignment meetings about the roadmap, because everyone knew the roadmap is not going to be the same at the end of these 2 months. It was even hard to hold that together in some cases for 2 months. So it was a very nice setup compared to some other traditional companies we've been at, who have sometimes 4 months of OKR cycles. So it means that you only get 3 of these a year, and everyone is going to jam everything in. We've also seen at faster companies like Omio, where the OKR cycles were 2 months. And to make it simpler, you need to agree with your core stakeholders on only 1 OKRs with a maximum of 3 KRs, not 5, not more. And that also made the conversations easier to align, because, hey, we need to agree on one thing and one thing only. And this needs to be also pretty achievable in this short time frame that we have. What worked well with ShapeUp was less of a need for scheduling. I really like the methods where planning is pretty lightweight, especially the ratio of planning compared to the time you're going to do discovery delivery. And that helped here, especially aligning with a lot of async tools before having the planning meetings and having widespread visibility across the companies on which are the directions that everyone from the product team is pulling towards. What we did notice works a bit less well in ShapeUp is when you have more junior PMs or junior engineering or junior designer. So you need a level of seniority across the board to allow them to enjoy this lack of structure. Because if you send a very senior PM in one of these death by Scrum meetings setups, they're just going to waste so much time in all of these ceremonies with very little impact, and they're going to get frustrated. But for a junior PM, this is super exciting, right? There's like a lot of hand holding that the process does for yourself. Same for developers. Whereas in ShapeUp, engineering needs to be at the table very early in the shaping of what we're going to do. And I feel this also works well with Teresa Torres' continuous discovery advice, as well opportunity solution trees, because there as well, the sooner you bake engineering, the sooner you understand if this is going to be a super simple thing or no, we need to rewrite everything or get a white label solution type of discussion. And the more companies start having also microservices haven't made that easier to summarize. Also working with different ML teams, applied science teams, or generative AI third parties makes it again harder, because as a PM, it can be a prompt or it can be a complex integration, and we will need to train the model, or we will need to now adapt the parameters that we're doing, or we would need to increase our costs because storage or computational power, and let's see if that where in the budget we take that from. So there are some things that worked super well, and I personally enjoyed it because the less structure I needed to abide with, the easier it was for me to figure out what are we actually doing here, and how are we going to make it happen. It was also a quite intense time from a meeting perspective, as there was no product ops at the time at Tier, and my team would have benefited enormously for this, which is also why we proposed it, and it then became a reality, as it was the compliance team. And in mobility, especially whenever you put a scooter somewhere, it needs to be approved by a tender, and to win these tenders, you need to provide a few things the cities want. So it's a more of a B2G type of play, business to governmental, where after you've done all your homework and are not getting fired by the city, then you can go around acquiring users. So that also made my topics very easy to highlight whenever I was crashing into the backlog of another team. But it created also a lot of pressure from market expansion, because to enable new markets, they will come with this heavy 50-pager document, and they're like, well, they want live view of where all the scooters are in the city. Okay, well, where do we have this live view? Well, we have it in the internal tooling, but it doesn't have the access permission needed for externals to see that, and they shouldn't see more than their city, and they shouldn't see more. Can we go around for it not being a live view? Maybe we just give them a dashboard export from Looker or MicroStrategy, or like one of these tools. Is the live part really necessary? So you kind of needed to have a lot of these conversations. Or there was another city that wanted the mandatory user onboarding, and of course someone from compliance came with this great idea of having a 9-minute video in the mobile app, and we went back and said, well, it says mandatory. Can it be one screen? It's like, no, that's too little. Okay, can it be 2 screens? Can we put a link to this 9-minute video that people can appraise in their own time, where they're not like freezing in the cold and trying to book something? This type of conversation, so that not having a lot of ceremonies with the dev team helped. Aside from a daily stand-up that we sometimes do async, helped not have to be super packed in my calendar and go focus on which markets do we want to harden in, and basically do all the things by the book and be fine with regulators. Which markets are we expanding? And to expand there, we need to be rated very well on the tender, which means these points become super important. So that was the personal example there. So, but again, if you need this type of development team that needs to be handheld through everything and have every ticket super scoped, then this may not work out with the ShapeUp method. For example, at Zalando, we didn't use ShapeUp. It was more of a super lightweight Kanban-ish, but with a cadence where we would still plan this. So you couldn't come in the... I'm afraid of saying it was Scrum, because it wasn't really... It was extremely lightweight from a ceremony.
So it was like Kanban with check-ins, right? I think that's what I sometimes call it.
I don't know, a Kanban plus. But what we had there as a very cool handover, which we've seen at very few companies, is that there was a product refinement session and there was a engineering refinement session. So this whole refinement became 2 meetings. I was expressly uninvited from the engineering refinement meeting, and things that didn't go past the product refinement. It was basically product pitching something to engineering and making sure that engineering understands what they will need to do to take this over in the next meeting and break it down. Sometimes there will be some comments or questions that would come from the engineering meeting, but not many. And when they came, they also came with a suggestion, because it was a relatively complex systems with a lot of dependencies on other teams. And we tried to do our best to minimize these dependencies or to move fast and validate what we wanted to validate without waiting for 2 months for another team to give us something, right? You're at a large enough company to have seen that already. So that becomes kind of the fight. And the team figured that out, and they were very good at sometimes even unblocking dependencies from themselves or figuring out how we can do things without needing to now go to pitch to other teams why our topic is important. So that they take us in.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening and to let you know about the Shapers and Builders job board. On shapers.builders, yes, that's the domain, you'll find jobs in software development, design, product management, and other roles at companies that work with ShapeUp. Many of these roles are remote, and teams who use ShapeUp generally run at a more sustainable, healthy, and meaningful pace than the hamster wheel of 2-week sprints. So if you're looking for a job in tech or trying to find great people, head over to the Shapers and Builders job board at shapers.builders. Now let's turn back to the conversation. You've mentioned a lot of points that resonate with my personal experience also around ShapeUp, where you've mentioned kind of not getting bogged down in ceremonies gave you the space in your calendar to engage with these kind of complex issues and stakeholders and so on. And I see that for a lot of teams. However, I think the criticism that ShapeUp at a high level receives oftentimes is that it's kind of a mini waterfall, and the sequence is quite long of 6 weeks that you commit to one thing. How have you, and you mentioned even this working with, continuous discovery. How do you see the ability to focus versus the ability to inject and be opportunistic? That kind of tension within ShapeUp.
We don't need to just follow it by the book, right? It's also, as with everything, use your own brain and see what it works for each company. We, of course, had these interruptions. And to some degree, it depends also how you have incident management set up, right? That's a completely different topic. Who triages this? When does it show up? Is every team solving their own incidents? Is there a rotation based in a pool of people? Because this is where the noise comes in, and the other noise could be internal. There's customer success, customer support escalation, or there's a rollout that hasn't gone as we expected, or there are various things. So at first, I would need a bit more context on how this company is set up and what is creating potential noise and interruptions. And then what's the solution for this? One good example from Omio that is a part of the core functionality of the product is based on a lot of integrations, but you can have that as well in companies that operate in a lot of markets, and then they have lots of payment processors, or even if they have an Adyen or Stripe, there are still things that can come out on the end of all of these integrations in every market. So that would be a team where the daily disturbance needs to be taken into account because you're prohibiting people from paying. At Omio's case, it was the integration to get the inventory. So if Deutsche Bahn has an outage, it's still problematic for the app themselves, because how are you now having visibility into the inventory and what people can book? And then that cascades downstream. So if there's a type of team where the daily incoming problems are what shapes up how that team works, then that should also be taken into account. Is then someone in product ops organizing this and researching to the team, Do you need a dedicated team that you just name operational excellence or something like that, and their whole thing is put out the fires and then build up patterns and processes around potentially not having repeatable fires, but you're still going to have new fires from new markets, new integrations, new use cases potentially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in practice, that's what I've seen teams set up to shield a bit against, both shield against noise, but also be able to jump on opportunistic things, or, in B2B context, have kind of what they call solution engineering team that can assist with these one-off requests, right, of clients, handle onboardings and so on. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to circle back to the point that you made around seniority, and seniority being kind of an enabler of ShapeUp, or also a prerequisite of sorts. And I wonder how you've seen that play out or what the spectrum is that you see in people being accepting of ambiguity in the work that they handle versus seeing that as something to minimize. Let's put it like that.
Understood. So you've already touched upon a very important part of what makes someone senior. You can give them a mess and they sort it out, right? The ambiguity level expands the more senior a person is. So by comparison, if you throw a junior person in something that's not super well organized, where they get like the next task well scoped, they'll be like, oh, this is such a mess. Oh, Whereas a senior person would be like that meme where there was this woman crying on a beach where there was a wrecked, I'm not sure if it was a plane or something else, and there was someone else sunbathing and being super relaxed. So the senior person would be around all this chaos and was like, oh, I've seen this before. There are some things that are fixable. There are some things that we probably need to figure out how we change processes or systems, but we'll get to it. Whereas the junior person will start being overwhelmed and confused, potentially even just try to throw hours at this, but not that successfully. Another part of seniority would also be the taking initiative and ownership. I'm going to take years out of this because we had people that weren't successful through our recruiting process with a lot of years of the resume, or weren't that successful in the fit product people is looking at, where the years didn't matter. It was more of taking initiative, being extremely fast with some types of decisions, understanding what to ignore, what to underperform at, even if I'm using this. You know how in gamers min-max their characters, where you get like level 2 at something that you're not planning to use, but you go level 10 at a few things. That I feel it's a senior person. So not only the ambiguity of the scope, but just figuring out where, hey, this is super serious, going to give it my 90 or 100%, and hey, I don't have capacity for this. I'm just going to let it slide and give it to a more junior person, or just tell people this is not getting taken into account, and monitor if it flares up, if at all. So there are all of these bets that someone very senior needs to do on a daily basis on all the incoming topics, and that differentiates them in this type of environment.
Cool. I love it. That's a great framework to think about seniority. So what you've told me is kind of being comfortable with increasing level of ambiguity, taking ownership, and then the ability to min-max certain things, as you put it, right?
Yes, because you can't take ownership of everything someone throws at you, right? Whereas a junior person would be like, I need to do everything. Whereas the senior would be like, what is this? Is this even in our focus for the next 3 to 6 months? Can we park it? This seems to be conflicting with this other thing. This person doesn't seem to be really knowing what you're talking about, or they're a bit confused. Let me ask more for more clarification. Then they will be like chop of everything that comes in, and have a strong mental model or where all of these incoming pieces fit in, and how they should be dealt with and when.
What are some of the elements or principles that you see are driving the ability to ship versus hindering the ability to ship?
Mm-hmm. That's a complex question because it also depends on the size of the company. when you are large enough and you're risking alienating a large user base or having regulatory issues, it can take 6 months to ship a checkbox at one of the large FANG companies, because that checkbox has a bit of regulatory drawbacks and may end up in a TechCrunch article or in some large PR topic. So that can hinder when you're operating at this scale. If you're very early on, you can take a lot of risks in some cases, but that also differs. If it's regulated medtech, you probably can't. So that's more of, okay, what's the business model? What are the risks of mistakes, and what kind of these mistakes that can happen when you move fast? Are they a revolving door type of mistake, you oops it and you roll it back, or it's a one-way type of decision, which is going to cost you a lot, depending on opportunities, financially, in time, if you need to turn back from that one. But I would feel that the business model also hardens a lot the way you can work and what you can do. Even sometimes the area of a company. So like, not even if a company is large enough, it's going to have a consumer facing area. It can be B2B, B2C, we could say user facing. If let's take a B2C product like Uber, which is actually not B2C because it's marketplace, right? So there's a driver facing app, there's driver tooling. The consumers have an app. The consumers have also a web portal where they can do various things. Businesses also have a portal where they could monitor like how their employees are spending taxi rides and putting a few rules, like not allowing taxi rides at 12 at night, but only during business hours. So things like that. If the business hours during the day, of course. And then the type of PM and the type of, let's say, shipping cadences and flexibility then will vary, because these are all now separate product lines. And if you're dealing with invoices or people's money, you probably don't want to have too many mistakes there on how you've calculated an invoice, as this breaches trust, and it's a powerful breach of trust. If you're on an area where fault tolerance is higher, then why not ship faster and have a fast learning curve? I know it's a very big answer for, hey, how does this work? And I like also the companies where the dev teams can set up their own micro way of working, and that have like a larger and flexible way of prioritizing how do we all pull together in the strategic direction of the product, while letting individual teams have some flexibility of how they arrange their work.
Basically, it revolved a lot around risk, right? How risky is it to be wrong with what you ship?
Yeah, versus how risky is it to be slow and lose the opportunity, right? As there's this concept in investing. I think I've heard it from Mark Andreessen on Exiting Z podcast. There are mistakes of commission and mistakes of omission. So mistake of commission, you break something, you make a sort of it's a very visible error. Mistakes of omission is that this could have been a 10x type of decision or a play, but you didn't do it, or you did it too late. And this is where the most money potentially is lost. Whereas with the mistakes of commission, you can lose a cap amount, but you can make the mistake of omission of not building this capability that will then drive a lot of traction, or bring the best return from everything else you've tried out in your area of the product.
And I think that's what also gets the most attention then in all the discussions around building software, this kind of errors of omission, right? Well, at least in what I'm observing is a lot of people talking about being too slow. Does that map to the work that you tend to do, or is your work more happening in the sphere of risk of commission?
It depends on the client profiles and also which area of the client we're solving. Because even at B2C clients like FreeNow, we've done invoicing for drivers, right? Where that's B2B play. You're touching people's money, and when you touch money, touch the heart of people if there's a mistake, or also if the payouts aren't fast enough, if the payouts aren't correct. There's a lot of legal compliance, and there you can take your time to make a decision as a PM. If it's something B2C facing at a Series A startup that just trying to grow and trying to do all the hacky things to grow, then being slow, it's a mistake that we would also consider problematic from the way our interim PM would behave. That's I would say like a very different way of working and prioritizing and being a bit more YOLO about it.
Yeah.
Then the other part where, hey, this is going to break the trust of our suppliers and we can't mess with that. We would rather just take a bit more time to think about it. Part of the slowness, also some companies are right. It's teams not being set up correctly, sometimes not being motivated or not understanding what they do, and sometimes also being a bit more junior or not being entrepreneurial in their way of thinking. And rightfully so, because we also all have come down from a very heated market in the investment space, right? And we came from 2020 to 2021, where anyone with a pulse that somehow work in tech will find a job at a well-funded company somewhere. We were just drowning in the amount of things that they would do. To, hey, we all ran out of money, VC pipeline dried up. Now we need to look at the quality of people, the work that they do, and at our costs. Lo and behold, now you're starting to feel like an agency like us, because we never had external investments. We always eat what we kill, and we need to be attentive of our costs, our work, how is the long-term fit of our people that we have here, how much can we hire versus like what the business outlook looks like, and so on. So it was an interesting also shift from growth at all costs and just let's throw more people at everything into, are these people doing the right thing? Are they the right people? And so on. And I feel that there has been a welcomed pressure also for engineering to not just throw their hands up and say, oh, the ticket is not scoped, or the PM didn't give me enough info, or I'm blocked, into things they could do to unblock themselves or get more ownership in that area. And I'm very happy for this type of change, because I feel engineering should also be excited about what they're building and be invested in it. And if they're not, maybe they should look for something else to do, because they're definitely not spending their waking hours productively, and work takes up most of our waking hours, which is then a loss of potential for those people, for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And actually that translates to what I've observed in other teams, is that engineering is now asked to collaborate more on actually how do we solve this problem, and maybe even sometimes upstream, like what's the problem to solve. We're coming up on time here, but I want to ask, how do you mentioned this in the very beginning, kind of reading the room when you're working with a client is really important. How do you work with the clients that you work with in understanding what type of risk profile do they have? What type of decision speed are they looking for in the PMs that you are bringing on board? Is that something tacit that you feel out, or do you have like a very explicit, what do you need from us template?
Of course, the what do you need from us template helps. We also ask, so maybe to step back on how we work, the person bringing us in or responsible for us in a certain business unit, because as large customers, we could have different people and they act as a different company altogether. That's what we call the champion. So that person then takes a risk bringing us in a traditional employment setup. That would be kind of our boss. And I have a talk about onboarding on like what we do and what we ask for. So we can also share it with this podcast to not repeat myself. But that would be a person that we trust initially to give us the correct information. Of course, the person could be also an unreliable narrator, and we try to figure out on that as we go along. The other part is understanding from what they say versus what they do, or how things look. And you've travel to other countries, right? So you've seen that even the subway signs change, or the roads look different, or the taxis are not yellow, they're like white color, or it's like something like that. Or for example, in South Korea, a free taxi would have a red light on, and a green light meant that they're occupied. So their red is seen as a go, green is seen as a no-go, a type of signal visually, which made also the stock trading apps confusing for a European, which is like green is going up, and red is going down. And I feel that this is a good parallel with how companies are set up. There's of course a lot of the age of this company, their business model, and their size. Sometimes there's a bit of a location flavor, but in the more international ones, we've seen that it stops mattering after a while. And our ideal customer profiles are also companies that have at least the ambition to become European-wide or global companies, because in this day and age, you need to have a focus that extends beyond one market. I hope that gives a generic but useful answer. Let me know if you need more. So one part that we do, and it's an unfair advantage for product people compared to, let's say, independent contractors that will go in at a client, is we don't send our PM alone. So the client may interview someone and may have that person as their main contact person. That person comes assisted by an associate PM for tactical support, and both of them are managed and mentored by a director of product or a VP of product, which means that we will request accounts for 3 people. So we also have a document explaining our ways of working and how that is beneficial, including, let's say, one of these people gets sick or takes a longer vacation, and that sickness coincides is at the same time with your quarterly planning, which would be very unfavorable.
Yeah.
But it happens. Life tends to happen. With once in a while, we'd get a signal that someone is in the hospital, and it's very unfortunate for the person. We send flowers, but we have then the rest parts of the trios to cover up for that specific unpreventable externality. So that's one way, due to the experience of the directors and the VPs of product, and from our people seeing different places, they can start understanding, okay, this kind of looks like an X. They seem to not like this certain thing. They seem to back channel more on these specific topics. There's also been a case where the people at the client don't like questions. It's perceived as questions being aggressive. So whenever you are not sure about something, you can't bring this up in a larger meeting. You need to back channel with the people involved in that meeting, and then after you have some agreement, bring it up. Whereas we're used as product people with a more direct culture, you kind of ask what's on your mind. Others are not. So there's like small differences that can make you successful or very unsuccessful somewhere. We rely on the experience of our people and the trio to learn. And that has also been very helpful for our client-facing PM, because if they observe something, they can ask the buddy or the buddy backup, which would be the associate, or their mentor, the director and VP of products, like, hey, these people at the client are doing this and that. What's your opinion? And since they would have access to our conversations, the Slack channels, and regular accounts at the clients, they could also see the raw materials or discussions themselves and not be a very diluted opinion that comes across lots of channels. We also conduct quality of service calls with basically having a very senior person in our organization, usually the one monitoring the engagement, talk separately with each important stakeholder and getting that feedback as well. Because sometimes we know that in some cultures, people don't like to give direct feedback to our people of something they should improve, but they would do that in a separate call with someone from our side. So all of these things we bring together and make it more successful for our people to operate somewhere, and also more stressful for them than being sent as an independent.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing so much about this industry that I knew absolutely zero about, and the ways that you work. I do want to wrap up with one question that I unfortunately didn't send you beforehand, so I hope you don't mind.
I'd like to improvise. This is also part of our work. There's an interesting series of articles about how consulting sometimes compares with improv, because
Yeah.
you're just giving a prompt, and you can't be deer in headlights. You need to take that prompt and gather enough info while you're still figuring things out to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's going to be an easy one. You've already dropped a lot of kind of resources, articles, books, people that you're inspired by. And I was wondering, this is a personal interest of mine, to be completely transparent, but what books or articles have you seen that are, I would say, tangential to the field of product management or product development, but inspired you? Do you know what I mean? Is there maybe
Absolutely,
something
and
that
and
comes to
this is,
mind?
I think the best product books are not product books.
Mm-hmm.
Like after you go past the basics,
Yeah.
uh, the next way you can improve yourself as a PM would actually be not reading PM books, because they all somehow are from the perspective of someone who did product at some point, and are not from a founder or MD or other options that are the most powerful stakeholders in an organization, which you need to build up a lot of empathy and understanding for, because they get you fired and they would be the ones shutting down your initiative. So from the business book side, I really like Thinking in Systems from
Oh, yes.
Donatella.
Donella.
Yeah, all right. So you've already heard that. So Thinking in Bets from Annie Duke, who won lots of poker playing competitions. On the non-business side, I'm a super big fan of the Culture series from Ian M. Banks, and I would recommend The Player of Games to start with. So if you haven't read The Culture, start with this book first, even if it's considered to be the second in the series, because it has such a good storyline in introducing you to this super advanced society. But at the same time, it gives you an understanding of how a great system operates, because this is a utopian post-scarcity society who conducts missions of goodwill in less developed societies to put them on the right track while minimizing the damage they would do. So they're not against doing sometimes risky things or getting some people in danger, which is again like the bit of a black ops part of the organization called special circumstances that does that. But the long-term goal is put these people on a path to become an advanced civilization as they are, where there's no suffering, no scarcity, and everything that has a conscience is treated as an independent individual. Then
Mm-hmm.
the third book, the other part from the Culture series is Use of Weapons. This is more intentional agent of this special circumstances unit that again goes in the specific missions. And to some degree, the PM is also a bit like these agents, because they go in to a place where they don't have control over, and they try to make it better to whichever means they have necessary. So I felt the parallels were very good. Also, and sometimes they break things unintentionally because they don't understand all the second order effects of whatever they're doing, which also happens in the Culture series as well. They try to do something right, but the mission somehow gets derailed, and then they need to live
Yeah.
up with the consequences of what they try to do, even if it came from the best of intentions.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Thank you for the recommendations. I read Play of Games, and in a way, I feel like some of the context that is given feels closer now that we are in this new AI advent, with I think the mind's playing a big role there. I don't know. I'd have to reread. Thank you for
Yes.
those.
So for the listeners of the podcast, the Culture has three different type of sentient entities. One of them seems to be a post-humanoid society, and then there are AIs that are intelligent. They're called drones and so on, that have autonomy and they can choose to not do some things you ask them to do, and have very colorful personalities, at least the ones in the books I've read. And then there are super AIs called the minds, and then they're usually on a ship that can hold the seed of a new civilization in it. So if something else happens to the other super AIs, that one alone holds enough people and enough knowledge and enough drones to just reseed the civilization themselves, which makes them also very robust as a society, because they are not living on one planet or a few planets that can be targeted. They're all floating around the galaxy. So super interesting. But again, there are some civilizations which feel, oh, we're getting now run by AIs and we hate AIs. Let's start self-destructing or trying to prevent that. So it's a very interesting thought exercise.
Yeah, definitely.
So the next one I would recommend, David, is use of weapons. Like if you DM me your address, I can Amazon it to you.
All right, I'll do that. Thank you for offering. And then on thinking in systems, actually, that's related to the number one blog post that I always recommend. There's a kind of a breakdown of the core ideas in a blog post called Places to Intervene in a System. Ooh. And it boils down this kind of, it's about these places to intervene in the system that are ranked from kind of easiest to tweak but lowest in impact to high impact but hard to change. So I want to throw that into the mix. Thank you so much. I'll put all of these recommendations into the show notes. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn, email. I mostly monitor social media, but I may not be that fast to reply depending on what's going on, because sometimes I would get an influx of 50 messages and some weeks are very quiet. So depending on like which kind of week this is, and if I'm speaking at a conference or there's some sort of activity, I may be slower to respond to you, but I will try to do that eventually. And otherwise, email, or if you're interested to join Product People, I would suggest applying directly, because I'm involved very far down on the recruiting process as the team successfully runs this for a while now. On the sales part, I can be an initial contact point, and then there's someone else who can continue the conversation, either commercially or for staffing people.
And since you mentioned hiring, just as a last mention, is there anything particularly, any roles in particular you're looking for, or do you have a rolling kind of open application process?
We have an open application process. Sometimes we would hire more people at an entry level into products, or what we call associate product manager. Sometimes we would hire mid-level, or sometimes we would hire more senior. So currently we have at entry level, associate PM, and at the senior level. And this is because we've had a few of our associates promote now to the PM level. So the mid-level part is covered very well from a staffing perspective. And now we need from the other sides. And we've had senior people promote, for example, some time ago into a director of product role. And then again, we will need to replenish the senior PM part. And that's how we think about it. And of course, there's sometimes attrition that happens, and then we decide if we replace the attrition or if there's someone already on the promotion path to that level, to make sure we have enough people of a certain seniority and not too many associates that will then not be mentored by people, or not too many seniors that will then not have associates to work with on certain engagements.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed it.
Same. It was a pleasure, David, and I'm happy to find another fan of the Culture series. See you.
See ya. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed the fascinating conversation with Mirela. If you like this show, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And to find jobs at companies that work with ShapeUp, remember to check out our job board at shapers.builders. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.